This program is supported by SMC Global Power.
Hello, I'm Alma Angeles and you're watching Eagle News International. Good evening, CJ.
Good evening, Alma, and good evening to everyone joining the broadcast on tonight's headlines.
The World Health Organization warned Monday the new COVID-19 Omicron variant poses a very high risk globally, despite uncertainties about the danger and contagion levels of the new strain.
The emergence of the new Omicron variant shows that COVID-19 is not done with us and demonstrates the need for a new international treaty to prevent pandemics, according to WHO Director General Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus at the opening of a special session of the World Health Assembly.
A 7.5 magnitude earthquake struck northern Peru, destroying buildings, including a church tower, injuring at least 10 people and sending shock waves across the region.
Fiji joined an international peacekeeping force, keeping a lid on simmering tensions in the riot-hit Solomon Islands as the Red Cross warned of food shortages in the Pacific nation's devastated capital.
First in our news, the World Health Organization warned that the new COVID-19 Omicron variant poses a very high risk globally, despite uncertainties about the danger and contagion levels of the new strain. Take a look. The UN Health Agency said the COVID strain first discovered in southern Africa was a highly divergent variant with a high number of mutations, some of which are concerning and may be associated with immune escape potential and higher transmissibility. The likelihood of potential further spread of Omicron at the global level is high, WHO cautioned in a technical note, and to date, no deaths connected with the Omicron variant have been reported. But the WHO said even if the new variant doesn't prove more dangerous or deadly than previous ones, if it spreads more easily, it will spark more cases and more pressure on health systems and thus more deaths. It said if another major surge of COVID-19 takes place, driven by Omicron, consequences may be severe, concluding that the overall global risk related to the new VOC or variant of concern Omicron is assessed as very high. Meanwhile, Dutch health authorities said they had identified at least 13 cases of Omicron among 61 quarantined passengers who tested positive for coronavirus after arriving from South Africa. Border police there announced Sunday they had arrested a couple on a plane at Schiphol Airport after they fled a hotel where the passengers were being quarantined. And one of the members of the couple had tested positive for COVID-19 and went into isolation, while the other person was negative but in quarantine, according to the Public Health Authority spokeswoman Stephanie Vanderberg. She added that both were back in isolation but not at the same hotel. They are a Spanish man, 30, and a Portuguese woman, aged 28, according to police spokesman Stan Verbert.
The emergence of the new Omicron variant shows that COVID-19 is not done with us and demonstrates the need for a new international treaty to prevent pandemics, says WHO Director General Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus at the opening of a special session of the World Health Assembly. Nations are meeting in Geneva from Monday to Wednesday to discuss an international agreement setting out how to handle the next pandemic, which experts fear is only a matter of time. Take a look.
More than any humans in history, we have the ability to anticipate pandemics, to prepare for them, to unravel the genetics of pathogens, to detect them at their earliest stages, to prevent them spiraling into global disasters, and to respond when they do. And yet, here we are, entering the third year of the most acute health crisis in a century, and the world remains in its grip. This pestilence, one that we can prevent, detect and treat, continues to cast a long shadow over the world. The emergence of the highly mutated Omicron variant underlines just how perilous and precarious our situation is. We don't yet know whether Omicron is associated with more transmission, more severe disease, more risk of reinfections, or more risk of evading vaccines. Scientists at WHO and around the world are working urgently to answer these questions. We shouldn't need another wake-up call. We should all be wide awake to the threat of this virus. But Omicron's very emergence is another reminder that although many of us might think we're done with COVID-19, it's not done with us. We're living through a cycle of panic and neglect. Hard-won gains could vanish in an instant. In less than a year, almost 8 billion vaccines have been administered around the world, the largest vaccination campaign in history.
Countries agreed to set up an intergovernmental body charged with drafting and negotiating a WHO accord on pandemic prevention, preparedness, and response. Sunday's draft decision, secured after countries agreed to compromise, should be formalized during the meeting.
Meanwhile, Prime Minister Fumio Kishida announced that Japan will reinstate tough border measures, barring all new foreign arrivals over the Omicron variant. Just weeks after a softening of strict entry rules, it had lifted its entry ban earlier this month for foreign business travelers and students, but has reversed course in hopes of preventing another wave of infections. Dennis Liu has this report.
Japan will reinstate tough border measures, barring all new foreign arrivals over the Omicron COVID variant. Prime Minister Fumio Kishida announced Monday, just weeks after a softening of strict entry rules. Japan's borders have been almost entirely shut to new overseas visitors for most of the pandemic, with even foreign residents at one point unable to enter the country. So first, listen to this.
外国人の入国については11月30日午前0時より全世界を対象に禁止をいたします。
In early November, the government announced it would finally allow some short-term business travelers, foreign students, and other visa holders to enter the country while continuing to bar tourists. Tokyo had already announced on Friday it would require travelers permitted to enter Japan from 6 Southern African countries to quarantine in government-designated facilities for 10 days on arrival. The step was expanded to a total of 9 countries over the weekend. That measure now affects travelers coming from South Africa and neighboring Namibia, Lesotho, Eswatini, Zimbabwe, Botswana, Zambia, Malawi, and Mozambique. Kishida said Monday that further quarantine restrictions would be imposed on arrivals from an additional 14 countries and regions where the variant has been detected, without giving further details. The Prime Minister said Japan is in a stronger position against the Omicron variant than other countries, citing voluntary mask wearing and self-restraints about risk behaviors. Japan has recorded just over 18,300 coronavirus deaths during the pandemic while avoiding tough lockdowns. After a slow start, the country's vaccination program picked up speed, with 76.5% of the population now fully inoculated. It has not detected any Omicron cases, but the National Institute of Infectious Diseases is analyzing a case of a traveler from Namibia who recently tested positive for the coronavirus. This is the latest for now. Reporting from Tokyo, Japan, this is Dennis Lu. We live in interesting times.
The Philippines also said it would temporarily suspend plans to allow fully vaccinated tourists entry in a bid to prevent the variant taking off in the country. Manila had hoped to revive the country's battered economy by allowing jab tourists entry as of Wednesday. Take a look.
Over the weekend, we have been making important announcements due to the recent developments with regard to the new COVID-19 variant, which the government has been monitoring closely. Yesterday, Sunday, the Interagency Task Force, or IATF, was convened and approved several resolutions. Una, inaprubahan ng IATF ang paglagay sa Austria, Czech Republic, Hungary, the Netherlands, Switzerland, Belgium at Italy sa ilalim ng Red List simula November 28, 2021 hanggang December 15, 2021. Bukod pa sa South Africa, Botswana, Namibia, Zimbabwe, Lesotho, Eswatini at Mozambique na una na nating inanunsyo noong Sabado. Ano pong ibig sabihin nito? Hindi pinapayagang makapasok ng Pilipinas ang lahat ng mga pasaherong galing sa Red List sa loob ng nakaraang 14 na araw, anuman ang kanilang vaccination status. Tanging mga Pilipinong pabalik ng Pilipinas via government-initiated or non-government-initiated repatriation at bayanihan flights ang pinapayagang makapasok. At isa sa ilalim pa rin sila sa umiiral na protocols sa entry, testing at quarantine para sa Red List countries, jurisdictions, or territories. Sa mga pasahero naman na in transit na and all those who have been to the above-mentioned Red List within 14 days immediately preceding arrival to the Philippines, who arrive before 12:01 a.m. of November 30, 2021, that's about 12 hours from now, pinapayagan silang makapasok sa Pilipinas subject sa entry guidelines. Ngunit, kailangan nilang sumailalim sa facility-based quarantine sa loob ng 14 na araw with testing on the 7th day, with day 1 being the date of arrival. Kahit na magnegatibo ang resulta ng kanilang RT-PCR test, 14 days pa rin sila facility-based quarantine. Sa mga pasahero naman na dumating na sa Pilipinas bago pa ang November 28, 2021 at kasalukuyan na nagka-quarantine, alinsunod sa classifications ng kanilang country of origin, as the case may be, kailangan nilang sumailalim sa kanya-kanyang testing protocols at sumunod sa pinatutupad na quarantine rules. Sa mga pasahero naman na kasalukuyang nasa biyahe pauwi ng Pilipinas mula sa mga bansang aking binanggit, Pilipino man o dayuhan, hindi sila maituturing na galing sa mga bansang iyon kung sila ay namalagi lamang sa airport, hindi lumabas at hindi na-clear for entry ng immigration authorities doon. At pagdating sa Pilipinas, kailangan pa rin nilang sumunod sa pinairal na testing at quarantine protocols. Pangalawa, inaprubahan din ng IATF ang pansamantalang suspension ng testing at quarantine protocols for countries, jurisdictions, and territories classified as green. Ito ay effective immediately hanggang December 15, 2021. Maliban sa mga bansang classified as red, ang testing at quarantine protocols para sa lahat ng inbound international travelers in all ports of entry ay kailangang sumunod sa testing at quarantine protocols ng yellow list countries. Sa pasahero mula sa green list na dumating bago ang November 28, 2021, isa sa ilalim sa kanila ang quarantine protocols na ating pinapatupad base sa kanilang country of origin upon the date of their arrival.
Resolution 15A was supposed to take effect on December 1st and stay in effect until December 15. The government has eased virus restrictions in recent weeks as the daily infection rate hovers at the lowest level since the beginning of the year and the nationwide vaccination rate increases.
Meanwhile, Australia today abruptly halted plans to reopen its international borders to skilled workers and students, an 11th-hour decision prompted by concerns over the COVID Omicron variant. After an emergency security meeting, Prime Minister Scott Morrison said the much-heralded December 1 reopening will be delayed at least 2 weeks. Australia's borders have been closed to most non-citizens for more than 20 months, causing labor shortages and pummeling the vital tourist industry. Morrison described the delay as a necessary and temporary decision based on medical advice. Australia has so far detected 5 cases of the Omicron variant, and Morrison cited new concerns about the efficacy of the vaccine, the range of illness, including if it may generate more mild symptoms, and the level of transmission. A plan to open the border to visitors from Japan and South Korea on December 1 is also now on hold. Australia has some of the world's toughest and longest-lasting border restrictions during the pandemic, thanks to a slow vaccine rollout. The Conservative government had opened the border to Australians, permanent residents, and Singaporeans, but not the estimated 1.4 million skilled workers who live in the country who were barred from re-entering if they left. Monday's delay will also cause worry in the country's hard-hit education sector. According to Universities Australia, an industry group, 130,000 international students remain outside the country.
The prestigious Bambino Gesù Hospital in Rome Sunday released the first image of the new strain and confirmed there were many more mutations than seen in the Delta variant, though said that does not mean it is more dangerous. The research team focused on the search for mutations in the 3-dimensional structure of the spike protein. Claudia Alteri, professor of clinical microbiology at Milan State University and researcher at the Bambino Gesù, told AFP. The image was produced from the study of the sequences of this new variant made available to the scientific community, coming mainly from Botswana, South Africa, and Hong Kong.
European Commission Chief Ursula von der Leyen said governments faced a race against time to understand the strain and that vaccine manufacturers needed 2 to 3 weeks to get a full picture of the quality of the mutations. Let's listen in.
We take this Omicron variant very serious, and we know that we are now in a race against time. Why that? Because we know not all about this variant, but it is a variant of concern. And the scientists and manufacturers need 2 to 3 weeks to have a full picture about the quality of the mutations of this Omicron variant.
She also said that a contract struck in the summer by the European Commission with BioNTech Pfizer for 1.8 billion vaccine doses included a clause in case of an escape variant, a strain that can evade vaccine immunity.
A long list of countries have already imposed travel restrictions on southern Africa, including key travel hub Qatar, as well as the United States, Britain, Brazil, Indonesia, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and the Netherlands. Israel has announced some of the strictest curbs, closing the borders to all foreigners just 4 weeks after reopening to tourists following a prolonged closure. Take a look.
ההגבלות על גבולות המדינה הן לא צעד קל, אבל זה צעד זמני והכרחי. ישנם ענפים שנפגעים כמו התיירות והתעופה, ואנחנו נותנים על כך את הדעת. הכי חשוב, כשאנחנו עומדים בפני איום צריך כמה שכבות הגנה. לנו יש חיסונים. אני מבקש מכולם, לכו להתחסן, זה שומר עליכם.
Meanwhile, President Cyril Ramaphosa on Sunday urged countries to lift the travel bans before any further damage is done to our economies. While Botswana Health Minister addressed the stigmatization and cautions against labeling COVID-19 disease variants with the names of countries in which they are detected. Take a look.
We call upon these countries that have imposed travel bans on our country and our other Southern African sister countries to immediately and urgently reverse their decisions and lift the bans they have imposed before any further damage is done on our economies and to the livelihoods of our people.
We were concerned that there seemed to have been attempts to stigmatize the variant in the country where it was detected. Detection in this case was treated as origination. It should be the presence of the disease, which should then call for all to do whatever is possible to avoid its transmission. Labeling disease variants with the names of countries is also contrary to the position taken by the World Health Organization to give variants neutral names that do not stigmatize any country or people.
The newly discovered Omicron variant is likely to fuel a surge in South Africa's coronavirus cases that could see daily infections treble this week. A top epidemiologist said that today. Health monitors reported over 2,800 infections yesterday, up from a daily average of 500 in the previous week and 275 the week before. Take a look.
We can expect that higher transmissibility is likely. And so we're going to get more cases quickly. We're already seeing early evidence of this. And if that happens, the cases concerned, I'm expecting we'll top over 10,000 cases by the end of the week per day. We'll see pressure on hospitals within the next 2 to 3 weeks. And even if Omicron is not clinically worse, and certainly the anecdotes don't raise any red flags just yet, but we don't know for sure, we are going to see this in all likelihood because of the rapidity of transmission.
South African scientists announced the new highly mutated variant on Thursday, blaming it for a sudden rise in infections in Africa's worst-hit nation. There is also concern the variant could be more resistant to certain antibodies, although its ability to evade vaccines is still being assessed. The severity of the disease it causes has not yet been determined, although initial evidence suggests symptoms are relatively mild.
Staying in South Africa, the government there said it is disappointed that fellow African nations have joined overseas countries in slapping on travel bans over the new COVID variant Omicron, calling their action regrettable. The country's top epidemiologist also adds it has almost no benefit. Take a look.
It's quite regrettable, very unfortunate, and I'll even say sad. To be talking about travel restrictions imposed by a fellow African country. I have seen in our country. So when a fellow African country does this, especially in the context where most of these countries are beneficiaries, South Africa has just made a substantial donation to donate vaccines to a number of African countries. And I see in the list, some of these countries who are imposing these travel bans on us are going to be benefiting from that. It doesn't make any sense. And that's why we think these decisions must be reversed immediately.
Omicron was first described in Botswana and then shortly thereafter in South Africa. And the fact that it was so early in its description and picked up is a scientific success. It's a success of the investment that our country has made in science. South Africa and the world now needs to convert that scientific success to a response success. As you've already heard, the last thing we need is panic and overreaction. And certainly what we've seen in knee-jerk reactions is really uncalled for. And we've dealt with variants before. It's not new. Our country has dealt. We've been among the first to describe variants before. So we know how to do this, including how to deal with variants with immune escape. Closing the borders has almost no benefit.
We know that there are many South Africans who are feeling that maybe we're too much in a hurry to announce the fact that this has been discovered. And because if we had kept quiet, possibly the travel bans would not have happened. But that would have been very detrimental because you don't want, our approach is not to have our citizens live in false security and false safety. And, like some of the world leaders have taken that kind of route.
And Eagle News International will be right back. Stay tuned.
Alam namin ang iyong pagsisikap. Dama namin ang iyong mga sakripisyo. Kita namin ang pagharap mo sa bawat pagsubok. Kaya sa kabila ng mga hamon ng buhay, nandito kami para umalalay. Kasi katulad mo, gusto rin namin ang magandang bukas para sa kanya. Hatid namin ang dekalidad na edukasyon at makabagong pasilidad sa abot kayang halaga. Kaya huwag ka nang mangamba. Sasamahan ka namin tuparin ang mga pangarap niya. Maaasahan mong sulit dito ang mga pinagsikapan mo. Sa aming mga makabagong pasilidad at sistema ng edukasyon. Mailalabas natin ang aking talino at mga kakayahan niya. Kahit sa munting halaga, makakasiguro ka na makakasabay siya sa mabilis na pag-ikot ng mundo. Sa New Era, karamay mo kami sa bawat hamon. Kaagapay mo kami sa bawat hakbang. Kasama mo kami sa bawat ngiti at tagumpay.
Mula noon hanggang ngayon, gabay natin ang MTRCB ratings sa matalino at responsableng panonood. Sa tamang pagsunod sa MTRCB ratings, ginagawa nating ligtas at makabuluhan ang panonood ng bawat miyembro ng pamilyang Pilipino. Lumipas man ang panahon, hanggang may pamilyang Pilipino, andyan ang MTRCB.
Welcome back to the news. A 7.5 magnitude earthquake struck northern Peru on Sunday, destroying buildings, including a church tower, injuring at least 10 people and sending shockwaves across the region. The strong quake hit at 5:52 a.m. or 10:52 GMT at a depth of 131 kilometers or 81 miles, according to the Geophysical Institute of Peru. Civil defense authorities said at least 10 people were injured while 75 houses were destroyed. The quake also caused damage in neighboring Ecuador. The epicenter was 98 kilometers east of the small Peruvian town of Santa Maria de Nieva in the Peruvian Amazon, a sparsely populated area inhabited by Amazonian indigenous people. The 14-meter tower of a colonial-era church collapsed in the La Halca district, also in the Amazon. The widespread power outages were reported and roads were cut off by rocks unearthed by the tremor. The deep quake was felt in almost half of the country, including coastal and Andean regions and the capital, Lima. Peruvian President Pedro Castillo said he had ordered all relevant ministries to take action immediately.
India's polluted capital Delhi reopened schools 1 week after it announced a partial shutdown over dangerous air pollution levels. Take a look.
तो बस ये है कि तो वायरस अभी गया नहीं है पूरी तरह से, प्लस ये पॉल्यूशन है, इसकी वजह से कफ कोल्ड वगैरह बहुत ज़्यादा बच्चों को सांस लेने में तकलीफ हो रही है बहुत ज़्यादा. हम लोगों को तो इसलिए निकलना पड़ता है क्योंकि मजबूरी है, तो निकलना ज़रूरी है हम लोगों का.
The sprawling megacity of 20 million people is regularly ranked the world's most polluted capital, with traffic exhaust a main driver of the toxic smog that permeates the skies, especially in winter. Restrictions on construction activities in the city had already been eased. Cleaner electric and compressed natural gas-powered vehicles will also be allowed to re-enter Delhi. The Commission for Air Quality Management for Delhi last week ordered anti-smog guns and water sprinklers to operate at pollution hotspots at least 3 times a day. But critics say such measures are cosmetic moves that fail to address the root causes of industrial pollutants, vehicular pollution, and crop burn-off coalescing into toxic winter smog. In a report published last year, Swiss-based IQ Air found that 22 of the world's 30 most polluted cities were in India.
Months after the eruption, Cumbre Vieja volcano continues spewing lava and ashes. Red-hot lava from the Cumbre Vieja volcano, which has been erupting since September 19, began sliding down a cliff into the Atlantic Ocean. Soldiers were deployed to measure air quality in the area, and residents of 3 nearby coastal towns were told to stay inside with doors and windows shut as wind blew the fumes inland. But the Canary Islands Volcanic Emergency Plan lifted the confinement order after confirming that the arrival of the lava flow did not affect residents. This is the third time that a lava flow has reached the Atlantic Ocean since the volcano began erupting 2 months ago, covering large areas with ash. Most of the island of around 85,000 people, part of the Canary Islands archipelago of northwestern Africa, has been unaffected by the eruption, with the lava flow concentrated on the western side. The molten rock has covered 1,065 hectares and destroyed nearly 1,500 buildings, mainly homes, according to Copernicus, the European Union Satellite Monitoring Service. Provisional damage was estimated on Friday at nearly 900 million euros, or about $1 billion, according to the regional government.
And to the U.S. now, where the much-anticipated sex crimes trial of Gislane Maxwell, the British socialite charged with grooming underage girls for late financier Jeffrey Epstein, is set to begin today before a packed federal courthouse in Manhattan. Now, the 59-year-old daughter of the late newspaper baron Robert Maxwell faces an effective life sentence if convicted in New York of sex trafficking minors for Epstein, her former lover, who killed himself in prison over 2 years ago. Maxwell's alleged crimes occurred between 1994 and 2004 and relate to 4 unnamed women, including 2 who say they were just 14 and 15 years old when they were sexually abused. Prosecutors say Maxwell befriended girls with shopping and movie theater trips, later coaxing them into giving Epstein nude massages at his various residences, during which he would engage in sex acts before giving them money. U.S. government attorneys say Maxwell sometimes participated in the alleged abuse at her London home and at Epstein's properties in New Mexico, Manhattan, and Palm Beach, Florida. Epstein died aged 66 in a Manhattan jail in August 2019 while awaiting trial on child sex trafficking charges in what New York's official coroner ruled a suicide.
Fiji joined an international peacekeeping force, keeping a lid on simmering tensions in the riot-hit Solomon Islands on Monday, as the Red Cross warned of food shortages in the Pacific nation's devastated capital. Take a look.
Past few days, to me, were not really good, especially when it comes in the preparations of food, because we were not informed of the protest claimed to be a peaceful protest. For a few days after that day on Wednesday, we don't have enough food, so we have to stay quiet at homes and listen out for any other developments with regards to the riots and the burning of shops.
Prime Minister Frank Bainimarama deployed an initial 50 Fijian troops to maintain law and order in the wake of deadly anti-government protests, lifting the number of peacekeepers to about 200, mostly Australian, with a contribution of at least 34 from Papua New Guinea. The Solomons crisis erupted last Wednesday when protests over government policies turned violent, fueled by poverty, unemployment, and inter-island rivalries in the nation of 800,000. After trying to storm parliament, mobs ran amok for 3 days, reducing much of the Chinatown area to smoldering rubble and attempting to torch Prime Minister Manasseh Sugavare's home. Calm was restored after Australian troops and police rushed to Honiara in response to Sugavare's desperate plea to Canberra for help.
Any other developments with regards to the...
Meanwhile, left-wing opposition candidate Xiomara Castro took a commanding lead over the ruling party's Nasri Asfura in Honduras presidential election on Sunday. Preliminary results showed, with 40% of votes counted, former First Lady Castro had taken almost 53.5%, with the national parties as Fura a distant second out of 13 candidates with 34%, according to a National Electoral Council live count. Castro, whose husband Manuel Zelaya was deposed in a coup in 2009, is hoping to become the first female president of Honduras. The country has been hit hard by gang violence, drug trafficking, and hurricanes, with 59% of the 10 million people living in poverty. And Washington has been keeping a close eye on the election. Honduras has been the starting point for a wave of migrant caravans trying to reach the United States.
Por un momento histórico para Honduras.
Russia said Monday it had carried out another successful test of its Zircon hypersonic cruise missile as world powers race to develop the advanced weaponry. Russia, the United States, France, and China have all been experimenting with so-called hypersonic glide vehicles, defined as reaching speeds of at least Mach 5. As part of the completion of tests of Russia's hypersonic missile weapons, the Defense Ministry said the Admiral Gorshkov warship launched a Zircon missile at a target in the Barents Sea at a range of 400 kilometers, or about 250 miles. President Putin revealed the development of the new weapon in a State of the Nation address in February 2019, saying it could hit targets at sea and on land with a range of 1,000 kilometers, or about 620 miles, and a speed of Mach 5 or Mach 9. Russia's latest Zircon test came after Western reports that a Chinese hypersonic glider test flight in July culminated in the mid-flight firing of a missile at more than 5 times the speed of sound over the South China Sea. Up until the test, none of the top powers had displayed comparable mastery of a mid-flight missile launch. China denied the report, however, saying it was a routine test of a reusable space vehicle.
Meanwhile, Iran is firmly determined to reach an agreement with major powers on salvaging its 2015 nuclear deal at talks that resumed Monday in Vienna, its foreign ministry spokesman said. The delegation of the Islamic Republic of Iran is in Vienna with a firm determination to reach the agreement and is looking forward to fruitful talks. That, according to Khatibzadeh, telling this to reporters. The landmark 2015 agreement offered the lifting of some of the array of economic sanctions Iran had been under in return for strict curbs on its nuclear program. But the deal began falling apart in 2018 when then U.S. President Donald Trump pulled out and began reinstating sanctions. The following year, Iran retaliated by starting to exceed the limits on its nuclear activity laid down in the deal. Since the last Vienna talks were paused in June, the ultra-conservative President Ebrahim Raisi has taken over, and his June government for several months ignored appeals to restart the talks. According to local media, the Iranian delegation now in Vienna, led by Deputy Foreign Minister Ali Bagheri, has been greatly expanded for the new round of negotiations.
Asian markets fell again today after last week's painful rout, fueled by news of the Omicron virus strain. But European stocks and oil rebounded strongly as investors try to assess its threat to the global economic recovery. Equities around the world went into free fall Friday on news of the heavily mutated variant, which some fear could evade vaccines, as it forced several governments to throw up flight bans from Southern Africa, where it was discovered, and introduced fresh containment measures. Some traders were taking solace in comments from 2 South African health experts who said symptoms of Omicron appeared to be mild so far, though the World Health Organization has urged caution. All 3 main indices on Wall Street ended more than 2% down, while London, Paris, and Frankfurt were also pummeled at least 3.6% lower. But even those losses were dwarfed by crude, which fell off a cliff on its worst day since WTI went down $0 at the outset of the pandemic, with dealers fretting over the possible impact on demand if more lockdowns are introduced. The Asian equities, which also suffered hefty selling pressure Friday, extended losses today. Tokyo led losses, shedding 1.6% after Japan said it will reinstate tough border measures, barring all new foreign arrivals, just weeks after a softening of strict entry rules. The news hit travel stocks, with airlines JAL and ANA shedding around 4% each. Hong Kong, Sydney, Seoul, Singapore, Taipei, Wellington, and Manila also retreated. Shanghai also fell, but the losses were limited, while Mumbai, Jakarta edged up.
In other business news, Nissan today unveiled plans for electric and hybrid vehicles to make up half its global sales by 2030, with the top executive insisting the firm's pioneer status would help it capture market share. Speaking to AFP, Nissan number 2, Ashwani Gupta, insisted the firm's electric vehicle targets were progressive and said he welcomed healthy competition from all electric rivals like the much-hyped Tesla. Last year, just 10% of Nissan's global sales were EVs or hybrids, and it said today it plans 23 new models, including 15 new electric vehicles, in a bid to reach the 2030 goal. It also said it will invest 2 trillion yen or $17.5 billion over the next 5 years to speed up electrification, compared to spending 1 trillion between 2010 to 2020, aiming to launch electric vehicles with its proprietary batteries in 7 years.
Finally, in our news, Stephen Curry came alive late as the Golden State Warriors shook off a sloppy start to beat the Los Angeles Clippers 105-90 and post their 7th straight NBA victory. With both teams turning the ball over and missing shots, it was close at halftime. The Warriors leading 44-42 on the Clippers' home floor. Golden State extended that lead with an 11-2 scoring burst to open the third quarter and never trailed in the second half, posting their 42nd straight game with at least 100 points scored. It looked like that streak might end, but Curry scored 13 points in the final frame as the Warriors pushed the lead to as many as 21 points after seeing it dwindle to just 2 late in the third period. Jordan Poole scored 17 points, including 3 in less than 2 minutes late in the third, as the Warriors withstood a 30-point performance from Los Angeles star Paul George. Curry, incensed at not getting a foul call as he drove for a layup with 9:11 left in the fourth, received a technical foul for yelling at a referee. The moment appeared to galvanize the Warriors superstar, who finished by shooting 53.8% from the field while handing out 6 assists and pulling down 5 rebounds. What a way to start the week. What an exciting week. And that's it for tonight's broadcast. Thank you so much for joining us. I am CJ Hero. The news continues tomorrow.
And I saw that twinkle in your eye when you mentioned Stephen Curry. At the end of the day, there remains so much more to be grateful for. We'll see you back tomorrow. I'm Alma Angeles, and we live in interesting times.
program is supported by SMC Global Power.
Welcome sa pinakabagong game show ng Net25. Maraming salamat po sa napakainit na pagtanggap niyo sa akin para maging bahagi ng saya at panalo agad-agad.
It's been a while and you deserve it. That dimples should be seen everywhere.
Kaya simulan na natin ang pamimigay ng agad-agad na kasiyahan at cash siyahan dito sa newest game show na diskarte at bilis ng kamay ang puhunan. 3 rounds ang paglalabanan ng 4 na players. Isa sa kanila ang magwawagi ng 20,000 pesos na posibleng